Hi, fellow Django developers. Hezekiah here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting topics about Django, helping you grow as a Django developer. So, if that sounds interesting, subscribe, like, share with family, friends, anyone that can find these videos interesting. Okay, so today we are discussing how to use multiple settings.py files in Django, right? We already have a blog post here on alwaysdjango.com. We are just going to reference this. I'll add the link to this description below, right? So it said most times our applications go through different stages and environments like development, testing, and production. Since Django settings.py files contain configuration and setting variables for applications, it's mostly common that we have to tweak or change these settings at different stages and environment. To solve this problem, most times we use conditional statements to determine the debug variable. Conditional statements will mean, like, maybe this is the typical settings.py files for a Django application. So we can do something like if debug say maybe app name is equal to this that, else we say app name is equal to something like this, right? So that's basically checking the state of this debug variable here, checking the state of this debug variable. If it's true, that's where if we are in debug state, that's if we are developing in development stage. Then if it's false, obviously we're in production or something like that, right? So benefits of using multiple settings.py files said it increased the security of our applications, then performance improvement. We also mentioned it here on another blog post on how to improve the performance of our Django application on number 9, right? You say using Django applications help you create different settings.py files for different stages and environments. So we also have, it makes for better collaborative development, so it helps you develop more, it helps you collaborate with other Django developers and things like that. So we have follow the following steps to create multiple settings.py file in your Django applications. We say number 1, create a settings folder. Obviously we have to have a Django application, so which is what we are going to do real quick here. So I go to my command line here. I say Django admin start project. Then we can name it anything we want. Let's say multiple settings. So the project is created. Let's seed into it real quick. If I can type, then open the project on VS Code. VS Code is really an interesting code editor. You can use it, right? I recommend using VS Code for your Django development process. So here we have a very simple Django application. Yeah, so this is the typical settings.py file for a Django application. So let's say maybe so let's see how we can use multiple settings.py file here. So let's create an instance application. Let's create an application, obviously in Django. So we say Python manage, if I can type, manage manage.py start app. Let's name it just test app. Let's say test app. So so we created this Django application here. Let's add it to the installed apps real quick. test app. So now, right, when you want to start this project, you say python manage.py run server, right? So we are starting this application now, right? Don't mind this red indication. It's for migrations that we have not applied yet, but that's not necessary. So for this application right now, it's using this setting.py file, but we'll have to change that obviously. So going back to our post, we say create a settings folder. This settings folder will house our different settings for different environment, production, testing, etc. So let's say settings, right? Then we'll create an init.py file. This will have Django recognize this setting as a module and things like. I think that's in Python 2.0, but we still do that by the way. So after creating a settings folder, then we say copy the current setting.py file to the newly created folder and rename it to base.py. So we say this settings.py file, we have to move it to this settings folder and rename it to base.py because like other settings will obviously inherit from this settings file. Then after that, we said create different settings files with preferred names: development.py, production.py. That's if you want to create different, you have to create different settings file for different environments: the production environment, development environment, testing environment, CI environment, any environment you want. Basically you have production.py. Let's say let's create development.py too, meant.py. So we now have two different setting.py settings file for our applications, right? Let's say then the next step, it says that's no the fourth one. It says start import from base.py and make applicable changes to the new settings file. So on this new settings file that we have created, development.py, production.py, we have to make a start importation. That's start import means we want to import everything from settings.base import everything. Basically that's what this means: import everything from this settings.base file, which is this, right? So start importation is not really something that is advisable to do, because most times it's now warrants it means you are importing everything from this file, which most times some kind of scenarios you might be importing unnecessary parts of this module, right? But in this case it's really not avoidable. So after importing, let's also import this on the production.py file. So after the importations, now there are simple settings that will change on different environments. The typical ones are this debug and allowed host. Obviously for our development environment, the debug state has to be true, right? But for our production environment, the debug state should be false, and there will be allowed hosts on this list or array, anyone you want to call it. There'll be allowed hosts here, maybe your local host, your production domain name or whatever. So these two settings, we are going to move them from base.py here to these places, to these new files, because they will have to change on these new files here too. So on development, right, on development we have our debug state as true, then no allowed host because it's not necessary. But on production we say our debug state on production obviously has to be false, right? And since it's false, there should be allowed host here. Let's just add our local host real quick, 0.1. So this is our local host here, so that we can be able to serve it locally from our local device here. So let me say I'll create, that's what you said here, start import everything, then add an installed application, make applicable changes, and so on, right? Then and so on. So we have to make changes on our manage.py file. This is because on a Django application, the Django application looks for your settings file in a folder named the same name as your project name. That's this project, the name of this project is multiple settings, right? So on a Django application, it looks for a settings.py file in a folder named multiple settings, named the same name as the project name, right? So this Django application will look for a settings.py file in this folder, but right now we removed it, is no longer here, right? So we need a way. If we stop our server and restart our server, we can see there is no module named this because it's looking for a settings.py file here on multiple settings, which is here, right? And there is no such folder, there is no such file in this folder, right? So we'll to tell Django that, hey, we have changed the settings file for this project, we'll go over to manage.py, which is what it's mentioned here. Make changes to the manage.py file to use any settings file you want, right? We'll go to the manage.py file. If you go down, you look at here, this line on line 9 here, you see that this multiple settings does setting, which is the file that we move from here, which is the normal settings file that should be here, that we want to run our settings file from, or our settings from. It has been removed, right? It has been removed to a settings.development.py or production.py. So we have to change this to settings, which is the name of this folder, then development, or maybe production, depending on what you want to do. But in this case, we just leave it as development, right? We'll change it later on for just testing case. So real quick, I'll make a view function. Okay, we obviously have that already. I'll make a view function that returns, let's call it index request, let's say render request, and we'll create a file called name.html. Then on this index.html, we will pass in the debug state. That's the debug state of this application. That's as a context. We say settings, and we import the setting from django.config import settings. Then on these settings we have settings. I know maybe you don't understand what I'm doing here. I'm just using it for testing purposes to show you that it actually works, right? This Django.config settings file, settings module, this is a callable that just gives you access to the settings file that your project is currently using. So it gives you access to these variables. So settings.debug will give you access to this debug variable on your settings file, or maybe on your settings file here, or maybe on your settings file when we're using a settings file in the multiple when we're using a settings file here. So this this will basically give you access to all the variables, functions, and everything in this set in your current settings file. So we are passing it to an index.py HTML file, which we don't have obviously right now. So we'll create a templates folder. In that folder, we'll create this index.html. In this index.html, we'll simply just render the past in this setting. Oh, let's call this debug. So on our view, we'll call this debug, right? Then we'll tell our application that we are using this folder on base. We'll have the templates. We'll tell our application that we are using this folder as we are using this folder as our template folder. We say os.path.join base directories templates. Then we import this. I will make a video, like possibly very soon, on understanding Django templates, right? So you have to be subscribed for you to get get notification on that. I'll make a video on templates, using Django templates, so that you can understand what I'm really doing here. But basically what I'm doing here is telling Django we want to use this folder as our templates folder. So when we on our view, when we return index.py, it checks our templates folder, which is here, and checks for an index.py, right? So right now we have made the changes to manage.py, telling manage.py that we're using this settings.development, which is this, as our settings file for this project, right? So on our URL, let's just say have a path, our index path. We import this from setting up the views. We import our index so starting the development server again, we'll go to this URL, it didn't return, we didn't return this, sorry, we didn't return this, so you can see that on our on our production, we say that our development is false, right? On our development, we say that our debug is true, right? So when on our view we get these settings, I will pass down the debug, right? And here we are saying that our debug state is true, right? But if we should go to manage.py file and say change this to production, we expect our debug state, to our debug variable, to now be false, right? Let's just stop our server first so that the changes will be applied, synchronized. We can now see that our debug state is now false, right? That means we can now use this product development.py settings file or production.py settings file, depending on what you want to do. So obviously when you want to deploy your application to maybe a server, to Heroku or whatever, so you now have to go here and change. If you were developing, maybe you were developing your application with development.py settings. Now if you want to deploy, you simply come here and write production setting. So now you can now push this code to the production environment, and you just had to make this simple change. Right now, if you want to run on alwaysdjango.com, you see it here, how to specify settings file to be used for your Django commands. If you want to simply, maybe you are in a haste, you are in a hurry, you have development here already, and you just want to check changes that will occur in your application if you use production settings file here, without having to come here to change this to production again, just to check, just to make changes and test the application real quick. You can simply, on any command you want to run, let's copy this real quick. Any command you want to run, you simply come here, type up the command. That's in this case we have python manage.py run server command. You can now pass in this dash settings. With this dash settings, you now tell the application the settings file you want to use to run this specific command. So when you're setting this, the Django command will not take its settings from this application, but from this settings file, but we take it from this settings file that you specify here. So here we have the settings file. How I want to use is the name of your project, multiple settings dot development. Let's use production here. Production. Say no module as this. Maybe we made a typographical error. Let's check it real quick. Settings, have settings production. Our settings is equal to multiple settings dot. Okay. I see the error now. I see this is settings module as this. So we simply pass in the settings.py settings folder and the production the settings file we want to use. So this folder right here, this module right here, settings.production. If maybe you want to use the development, we say development. So right now this application will use this development settings here. This is development.py settings here for this command you are running. Any other command you want to run, you just simply type python manage.py any command. Let's say migrate dash settings is equal to settings dot whatever setting that you want to use, right? So this is basically how you use your use multiple settings.py file for your Django application. So you follow the simple steps. You create your application. Obviously you create a settings folder or whatever I want to name it. Really, you create your settings folder, then you copy the current settings.py file to your newly created folder. You create your init.py file in the settings folder. Then you create your different settings files for different environments. You can have your development environment, your production environment, your testing environment, your CI environment, any environment you want to really push your project to, or you want to run your application on. So you start import from the base.py, which is the normal settings file. You start import everything, every single variable from that file, from the settings of the former settings.py file. Then you make the applicable changes. Then you go to your manage.py file. You you make these changes. This os.environment set default Django setting module. You write your project name and the settings that you want to use, right? So that's really it. Then when you want to run a command and you want to specify which settings file you want to use for that specific command, you just write your command. You write dash dash setting is equal to that. This is an optional argument to any Django command you want to run. You say dash dash settings is equal to setting, the name of your folder, dot the Python file you want to use as your setting. So that's really it, guys. This is how you use multiple settings.py file for your Django application. This is how you use multiple settings.py file for your Django application. You can, if you enjoyed this video, you can like, subscribe, share with your friends. The link to this post right here, I'll add it to the description below. So thank you, and thanks for staying in touch. Peace.